أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، وأفضل الصلاة والتسليم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري. Oh Allah, open up my heart and my mind to receive the information I'm about to gain, and ease my affairs. وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي, and untie the knots in my tongue so that they may understand what I'm about to say. رَبِّ أَرِنِي الْحَقَّ حَقًّا فَأَتَّبِعَهُ. Oh Allah, let me see the truth as the truth so that I may follow it. وَالْبَاطِلَ بَاطِلًا فَأَجْتَنِبَهُ, and falsehood is falsehood so that I may avoid it. وَلَا تَجْعَلْهُ مُتَشَابِهًا عَلَيَّ, and don't let there be a confusion between the two, between truth and falsehood. فَأَتَّبِعْ هَوَايَ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ, lest I follow my whims without even realizing it. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Holy Quran in chapter 55 verse 33. He says, يا معشر الجن والإنس إن استطعتم أن تنفذوا من أقطار السماوات والأرض فانفذوا لا تنفذون إلا بسلطان. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse, O nations of jinn and men, genies and men, if you are able to leave the realms of the earth and the skies, then do so. You will not do so without my authority. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today our goal is to move on to the fourth criterion. We mentioned that in order to prove that a divine message is truly from Allah, truly from the Creator, the Unlimited, the All-Perfect, then it must be that it is a reflection of His most important characteristic as well. We said just as an author of a book, right, their style of writing is a reflection of their experience and their character and their personality, the same would apply when it comes to a message that comes from our Creator, from God. It has to be that the message reflects His perfection, right? Reflects His unlimited nature, right? And so based on that, we said, all right, well, the first two criteria to determine whether a message is truly from God are based on the fact that He is unlimited. And we said first, since He's unlimited, He doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end. That means He's constant. That means His message must also be constant. And we found that when we applied this to the Torah, to the Bible, and to the Holy Quran, the only one that passed this first criterion was the Holy Quran. And we said the reason why is because we don't have the original Torah, we don't have the original Bible today. Then we moved on to the second criterion. And the second criterion, we said, is that since the Creator is unlimited, that means He's flawless. Right? He doesn't have any flaws because flaws are limitations. We said, so that means then that He's all perfect. Another word for flawless is perfect, right? So that means that He doesn't contradict Himself. He doesn't mince His words. He doesn't make mistakes, you see? So, because He's all knowledgeable, He's all perfect, so He doesn't make any mistakes. And so that means then His message must have no mistakes and no contradictions in it whatsoever. And so what we did, again, we said, okay, let's see, do we find any contradictions or mistakes in the Torah, Bible, or the Holy Quran? And when we looked at, obviously, the Torah, we said doesn't exist. So we took the Jewish Bible, which is considered to be the Old Testament. And we also took the Bible for the Christians, the Holy Bible. And we found that there were contradictions, specifically Genesis 7:1 versus Genesis 9:20 to 25. So then we also looked at Proverbs, right, to say, well, okay, if, is being drunk, because they claim that Noah was drunk, right? وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, God forbid, representative of God gets drunk and does unrighteous behavior. We said that contradicts with 7:1 of Genesis, where clearly in that verse it says that God said that He's the most righteous of His generation. So then we looked further into the Old Testament and the New Testament. We said, look, if it says in there anywhere that it is prohibited to drink wine and strong drink, meaning alcoholic beverages, then that means that there is definitely a contradiction here. It's got to be that somebody added this so that they do a character assassination of the prophet of God, a representative of God. And surely we found in Proverbs, chapter 20, verse 1, chapter 23, verse 20, chapter 23, verse 32. Okay? Do not be amongst wine bibbers, riotous eaters of flesh. Wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, right? And whomever is deceived is, or whomever basically partakes is unwise, right? Whoever is deceived is unwise. So, and then of course, it biteth like a serpent and stingeth like an adder. So obviously there's a contradiction. And then when we looked at the New Testament, we found in Luke, in the Gospel of Luke, at the very beginning of the Gospel, in chapter 1, verse 15, we found that it says, speaking about Yahya, Prophet Yahya, that, and he was great in the sight of the Lord, and he neither drank wine nor strong drink. So that tells you a prophet of God does not drink, right? Not any alcoholic beverages, and certainly not wine. So we said, okay, great. So obviously then there is a contradiction within the Bible and Torah, the Jewish Bible, I mean. And so we said, okay, so they don't pass that second criterion. We moved on to the Holy Quran. We found that there are no contradictions whatsoever in the Holy Quran. We said any claims that were made out of context, and they were refuted very easily. We moved on then to the third criterion. We said the third criterion was that the message has to have information in it that refutes any false claims that are made by scholars of past religions, right? Or atheists or the like. And we found that we basically focused on 4 false claims. Noah being drunk, according to the Old Testament, that's one false claim. Ezra being the son of God, that's what the Jews claim. And then as well, Jesus being the Son and the Father, right? Which is the Christian claim. And then that he is God, right? And then lastly, that Jesus was crucified. We answered all of those in the last lecture. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them now, otherwise it's going to take us forever. Okay, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Today we will move on to the fourth criterion. The fourth criterion is specifically that the message has to have information about the universe that nobody would know except for the Creator himself. Okay? So we'll focus on that one, inshallah. And then the next one we'll get to will be criterion 5, which is that the message has to be miraculous, supernatural, because the Creator himself is supernatural. He's beyond nature. So let's get started with the fourth criterion then. Now, if we look into the Holy Quran, we find that there's a verse in the chapter of An-Naba, chapter 78, verse 6. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَلَمْ نَجْعَلِ الْأَرْضَ مِهَادًا, and did we not make the earth swaddled? Mihad is a swaddle. Okay. Now, everybody knows what a swaddle is. When you swaddle a baby, it's basically you wrap it. You wrap the baby tightly. Which implies that the earth then, if it's swaddled, that means that something's wrapped around it. Which means it has dimension. It's not flat. And you have to remember that for a very long time, humans thought that the earth was flat, right? It wasn't until Galileo and Copernicus that we learned, Galileo in 1632, Copernicus in the 1500s, Galileo specifically discovered that the earth is spherical, that it has dimension. And of course, the church that believed that the earth was flat at the time, they controlled the government, so they had him arrested, and they had him incarcerated, and then they had him killed for heresy, okay, because he made this claim. So it wasn't until 1632 that humans discovered that the earth was actually dimensional, that it has 3D, okay? And even at that point, obviously they didn't accept this fact, and whoever claimed this fact became accused of heresy, meaning that they were a criminal, and they literally burn them at the stake, okay? This is unfortunate. So, but how could the Quran have known this 1400 years ago? Think about it. 1400 years ago, there weren't the tools of measure. We're talking 610 AD, okay? In the year 610. Galileo discovered that the earth was three-dimensional in 1632 AD. That's 1,000 years later, over 1,000 years later, 1,020 years later, right? So we didn't have the tools of measure. We didn't have the science at the time. How could the Quran have known this? Okay, unless whoever put that information in there was the original engineer that made this earth, okay, and made the universe. Think about it, okay? All right, so, but what about this swaddle? The swaddle is a protective cover. Now, if you were to research on Google, right, just Google search the magnetosphere, you will find that the earth has a magnetic field around it that's actually shaped from one side. It looks like the head of a baby, and the rest of it literally looks like a baby when they're swaddled. Like when you wrap a baby up and they're all, toasty and cozy like this, right? Okay, if you just search that on your phones right now, you will find the Earth's magnetosphere is actually shaped like that. Actually looks like a baby that is swaddled, okay? So what does this magnetosphere do? It protects the Earth from cosmic phenomena. For example, asteroids, comets, right? It basically sunbursts, right? It protects the Earth from all of these different cosmic phenomena that may hurt the Earth. Okay, so what does a swaddle do? It protects a baby from what? From the elements, right? Protects it even from itself, right? From scratching its face. From yeah, exactly. So then, who could have known this 1400 years ago? It was a man by the name of Walter Gilbert in the 1600s who discovered the Earth's magnetosphere. And okay, so we're done with that. Let's move on to the next one. In the chapter of Ar-Rahman, okay, in chapter 55, I believe it's in verse number 17, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, 55:17. What does the Holy Quran say? It says, Rabbul Mashriqaini wa Rabbul Maghribain. It says the Lord of the two sunrises and the two sunsets. Now think about it this way. So if there's two sunrises, there can only be one sunrise if the earth is flat. Think about it. Only one sunrise, only one sunset. If there's a second sunrise and a second sunset, that means that the earth is moving, it's spinning, right? And if it's spinning, that means it's spinning around an axis, a central axis. Now, it wasn't until the 1500s that Copernicus discovered this actual fact, right? And of course, he would be, accused of heresy, he would be incarcerated, and he would be put to death as well, okay? But he not only discovered that the earth rotates around its own axis, but it also rotates around the sun, okay? So who would have known this 1400 years ago? This is in the Holy Quran, right? In chapter 55, verse what? Verse 17. Remember that. So far we covered chapter 78, verse 6, that the earth is swaddled, according to the chapter of Naba. Now we covered chapter of Rahman, 55:17. Okay? That the Lord of the two sunrises and the two sunsets. So sunrise, sunset, right? Sunrise, sunset. Sunrise, sunset, right? See, the turning around an angle. A central axis, okay? I should say. Okay, so next, let's look at the mountains, okay? In the Holy Quran, let's go back to chapter 78 of An-Naba, verse number 7 now. So we said, Alam naj'al al-arda mihada, did we not make the earth swaddled? After that he says, wal jibala awtada, okay? And we created the mountains like pegs, right? Or nails in the ground. A peg is a nail, okay? So al-watad, specifically the word watad, is used when it comes to pitching a tent. It's basically the end of the rope that you attach a stake to it, not a stake that you eat, a stake as in a big nail. You hammer it to the ground, right? That's what's called a watad. Okay. So what's interesting is that when they took a cross section of a mountain in the 1950s, I think it was like a sonogram that they took. Some geologists, what did they find? They found that the shape of a mountain is actually, we're only seeing the head of the mountain, like the head of the nail or the peg, while at the bottom, it's literally nailed. It looks like it's nailed into the ground, okay? So who could have known this 1400 years ago when it mentions this in the Holy Quran? Isn't that amazing, right? Okay, so that's one aspect of the mountains. But then there's another verse in the Holy Quran in the chapter of An-Naml, chapter 27, verse 88. And it says in it, وَتَرَى الْجِبَالَ تَحْسَبُهَا جَامِدَةً. And you look at the mountains and you think they're still. وَهِيَ تَمُرُّ مَرَّ السَّحَابِ. And they move just as the clouds move. Now this is a reference to tectonic plates, right? Okay, that's a reference to. Right? Because we know, and we spoke earlier about earthquakes and tectonic plates, right? And the fault lines, we know that the earth moves, right? Because of the central core, okay? Who would have known this 1400 years ago? I mean, think about it. Geologically, to do sonograms of the earth, to take a cross section of earth, didn't happen until the late 40s, early 50s, okay? That's 1940, 1950, right? But in the year 610, the Quran is already mentioning tectonic plates here and the movement of the mountains when nobody knew anything about the movement of the mountains at all, right? Who would have known this except for the Creator himself? Let's look at another example. So now we're done with the mountains. Let's look at the skies, okay? We know, according to science, that the skies are at levels, specific levels. There's the stratosphere, the mesosphere, the troposphere, etc. Okay, there's several levels of sky, including, of course, up to outer space. If you include outer space, you would have a total of 7 levels that we know of. Now, what does the Quran say? Also in the chapter of An-Naba, go back to it, chapter 78, verse 12. Verse 12 this time. So far we had verse 6, chapter 78, verse 6, the earth is swaddled. We had verse 7, which was speaking about the pegs, right? The mountains being like pegs, right? And now we have verse 12, which says, وَبَنَيْنَا فَوْقَكُمْ سَبْعًا شِدَادًا, and we built over you 7 strong strata of sky, right? And this wasn't discovered until, I'll try to remember the name of the scientists. There were 2 scientists who actually discovered this. One was French, and I believe the other was German. And this was in the year, tectonic plates, just so that you have the person's name. His name was Alfred Wagner, and he discovered this in 1915. Okay, so tectonic plates was discovered by Alfred Wagner, who was a German scientist, in the year 1915. And then the strata of sky, there were 2 people who discovered this: Leon de Boer and Richard Asman, with 2 S's. Okay, so Leon de Boer, French scientist, and Richard Asman. And this was in 1902. 1902. Okay? The Quran mentions this 1400 years ago. Right? What's the difference? How many years? 610. Right? You're talking 1300 years before. Right? Who would have known this except for the creator of the universe himself? Right? So, fingerprints also are in the Holy Quran. Fingerprints. If you look at the chapter of Al-Qiyamah, chapter 75, okay, أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانُ أَنْ لَنْ نَجْمَعَ عِظَامَهُ, does mankind think that we cannot collect his bones and resurrect them? بَلَا قَادِرِينَ عَلَىٰ أَن نُسَوِّيَ بَنَانَهُ, surely we are even able to put back his fingerprints. Now, banana, not banana or bananas, we're not talking about fruits. Banana in Arabic means the tip of your fingers. So someone might say, well, tip of your fingers, we'll say, hang on. First of all, it was Sir Francis Galton, okay, in the 1880s. He was the cousin of Charles Darwin, by the way. He discovered, him and another scientist as well in Germany, discovered fingerprints. Before, they used to try to measure people's ears, their noses, the length of their limbs, their legs, all trying to figure out what distinguishes one human being from the other, until these 2 scientists, specifically the one who's most credited for it is Sir Francis Galton, okay, in the 1880s, who is the cousin of Charles Darwin, that he discovered fingerprints. But let's say, for example, you say, well, Shaykhna, banana, meaning tips of your fingers. It doesn't necessarily say the word fingerprints. I hate to break it to you, like in Arabic, it's not exactly the same English word for fingerprints, right? Even though we say basamat today, but in that old age, in that time, before that term was placed for that specific item, it was known as the tips of your fingers. It wasn't known as, fingerprints per se, right? Until it was actually discovered. So, okay, so we might say, I'll say, okay, humor me, or I'll humor you, okay? What if I tell you that in actual fact, space travel and air travel is mentioned in the Holy Quran? Would you believe me? By now, it should be easy to believe me, right? Okay? Because look at all of the proofs and by the way, there are many more. All you need to do is look at Surah Al-Rahman. Okay? Surah Al-Rahman is full of these scientific facts, subhanAllah. So, space travel, we started out with chapter 55, verse 33, right? يا معشر الجن والإنس إن استطعتم أن تنفذوا من أقطار السماوات والأرض فانفذوا لا تنفذون إلا بسلطان. Oh, nations of genies and men, mankind, meaning mankind, if you are able to leave the realms of the earth and the skies, then do so. But you won't do so without my authority, Allah says. Meaning what? Meaning I need to understand the laws, the physical laws of nature, in order for me to be able to, create rockets with which, I can fly into outer space, or airplanes with which I can fly within the sky and leave the earth, right? The ground. So when did we actually start flying? It was the Wright brothers, right? The Wright brothers were the ones that flew first, and this was in 1903. Now, what about space travel? Space travel was in 1961. The first person to actually circle the Earth was Yuri Gagarin, who was a Russian cosmonaut. Okay, And that wasn't until 1961. So think about it. So we had Wright brothers, 1903. That's how many years after 610? That's 1,300 almost years after. And then what about, Yuri Gagarin and the Russians sending this cosmonaut into outer space? That wasn't until 1961, right? So who would have known this except for the creator of the universe himself? There can be no other explanation other than that, right? You all agree? If you agree, say I agree. Good. With that, all we're left with then is the last criterion. And inshallah, tomorrow we'll cover criterion number 5, that this message has to be supernatural, right? So far, the Quran is passing every single criterion that we've placed, right? So far it's looking like it's a done deal. But just to put the last nail in the coffin, so to say, as they say, we'll inshallah do the fifth criterion tomorrow بعونه تعالى. هذا والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين والفاتحة على أرواح المرحومين مسبوقة مشفوعة بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.